So here are the rest of the notes for section 1, day 2, writing piecewise functions. Here's example 2. As you can see that we now have 3 lines, meaning we will have to create 3 equations. For each of these equations, we do have to find the slope, okay? So remember, to figure out the slope, you can either count, or I would recommend maybe using the formula. Okay, so let's figure out the slope of the blue line first. So here, basically what I do is I use my 2 points. So I have 4, because that's a y point, and then I do minus a negative 2. Remember, that gives us a positive 2. Okay. Now, it does not matter which one you use first for the y values. Now, when it comes to the x values, it does. Since I used 4 first, now I got to use negative 2, so I do negative 2. And then minus a negative 4, which gives me a plus 4. Okay, so I get 4 plus 2 to give me 6. And then on the bottom, I have negative 2 plus 4, which basically gives me 2. So my slope in this case is going to be 3. Now, I'm going to use the point slope formula to get my equation for the blue line. So I have y minus, now I use one of my y points. Let's just say we use negative 2 and 4. So 4 is going to be my y value, which equals, we do slope times x minus, and now since we have a negative, right, we make it a plus 2, okay? So I distribute the 3 to the x as well as the 2, so I do 3 times x, 3 times 2. That gives me now y equals 3x plus 6. Now I'm not done quite because I have to get y by itself, so I add 4 to both sides. So now I get y equals 3x, right, plus 10. Okay, so that's the equation for our first line, or the blue one. Now let's try to get the green one, okay? Now if you look here, right, the green one is horizontal, okay? Now let's go ahead, let's figure out the slope. So then here, right, negative 2, 4, 2, 4, those are 2 points. Remember, it does not matter which y point you use first. So let's just use the 4 right here on the left-hand side first. So we have 4 minus another 4, okay? Now we do negative 2 minus 2, which equals, and then we have 4 minus 4, which is 0, over negative 4. Now remember, if you ever have 0 in the numerator, that just gives us a big 0. Now this should be true. You should have a 0 slope whenever you have a horizontal line. So you really don't have to use the formula to figure out the slope of a horizontal line. You can always assume it's going to be 0. Okay? Now we take our slope and then one of our points and plug it into point slope formula so we can find our equation, right? So we have y minus, and then here, right, pick any point you would like. Let's just try negative 2, 4 again. So we have minus 4 equals, well, 0 times x plus 2. Okay. So now we distribute that 0 to the x and 0 to the 2. Well, you should know anything times 0 just gives you 0. So we have 0 on that side, so we have y minus 4 equals 0. Now we're not done because what we have to do is move the negative 4 over, so we add 4 to both sides. We get y equals 4. Now, you do not have to do all this work for the horizontal lines. Just remember, with horizontal lines, that the slope is 0. And then basically, your equation is always y equals, and then whatever that y value is, okay, which is 4, as we can see on the graph here. Now, lastly, we need to figure out the equation of the red line. Now, here we do have to figure out the slope and then plug it into the point slope formula to find the equation. There's no shortcuts here. Okay, so now let's find slope. I'm going to put it over here. So we have m equals, so we have 2 comma 4 as one of our points, and 4 comma negative 2. Remember, it does not matter which y value you use first. I'm going to use negative 2 first. You know, you could have used 4 if you wanted to first. Okay. Now, it does matter which x value to use first. The 4, which is associated with the negative 4, or negative 2, sorry, goes first, and then we subtract it from our 2. So we have negative 2 minus 4. That should give us negative 6. And then here we have 4 minus 2, which is 2. And then we should get negative 3. We should get negative 3 as our answer because, as you can tell, the line is going down. Okay, so down means you get a negative slope. Now we're going to plug this into our point slope formula. So we have our y minus. Now we can either use 2, 4 or 4, negative 2 as our point when we plug in. Let's go ahead. I'm going to use 2, 4. Okay, so 4 is my y value. Set it equal to my slope times x, and then our x value is 2, so I say minus 2. Now what I do is I distribute that 3, or negative 3, to the x, and then I distribute it to the negative 2. So now I have y minus 4 equals negative 3x. And remember, negative times a negative gives us a positive, so we get a plus 6. Now we're not done. Remember, we have to get y by itself, so we add 4 to both sides. So we have negative 3x, once again, plus 10. So now we have all 3 of our equations. Now writing our piecewise function, remember we need to start with f of x, okay? We set it equal to, and then we use the curly brace. Don't use brackets, don't use parentheses. That would be considered incorrect. So let's write our first equation that we got, the 3x plus 10. So we're going to write that one first. The next one was just y equals 4, so we just put the number 4. And then our very last one was negative 3x plus 10. And the commas, because we're going to figure out our restrictions. So now here we have to look, right, for our first one, where basically the green and the blue line, where they have an x value in common. That will create our restriction, okay? So here you can see that we do have a solid dot, so we will be using an equal bar somewhere. So in this case, if we look, right, that their x values, what they have in common is a negative 2. Now if we look, the blue line, right, the x values for the blue line get smaller. So when we write our restriction, x should be smaller, and then we're going to get equal to negative 2. Okay? So now for a restriction for the 4. Now this comes the difficult part, because we only dealt when you have one restriction. The green line is actually going to have 2 restrictions. So we're going to start off where the green and the blue intersect, okay? And then we go to where the red line and the green line intersect. That will be a 2, okay? So our smallest limit, or which will be part of our restriction, is going to be negative 2. So we have negative 2. Now here, because we've already used the equal bar, right, when we do our inequality next, it's not going to have an equal bar. Because if both of them did, that means you would have 2 of the same y values, which would not make it a function. Then we have x. And now, because we have 2 restrictions, we create a compound inequality. So x is bigger than negative 2, but x is also smaller than, and this is where the intersection between the green and the red line come to play. We see what x value they have in common, which I can see is the 2, and so that will be part of our restriction. So x is less than 2. Now lastly, we have to figure out the restriction for negative 3x plus 10. Here we see where we left off. So the green line stopped, but that's where the red line starts, okay? So because of that, we start back up at 2, and if we look at the red line, the x values are getting bigger. That means our x values are greater than, and now we do equal to, okay, because the last time we did do equal to, x is greater than or equal to, now we say 2, because we want all values bigger than that. So after that, this would be your answer. And there you go.